Welcome back, everybody. John Aravosis here with the Aravosis Report, here to talk to you about the latest news from Ukraine. And we've got a lot of news today, actually. Do your introductions all, and I will start the TikTokers here on my right. Anyway, yeah, a lot of news today. I mean, lots. Like, it's been slow recently, I think. But anyway, ton today. Very interesting news too. So you are okay, Felix, because we are just starting right now. Radoslav, good to see you. Oh, and hello, TikTokers. How be you all? Anyway, do your usual, folks. Just kind of do your hello. Oh, no sound. Oh, hold on. Gonna unplug and replug on TikTok. The sound is being funky on me. Hang on, TikTokers. Let's see. All right, now hang on, guys. I'm assuming you guys can hear me over there. Let's see. TikTokers, is it good now? Okay. Okay, you know what? Then I'm going to leave this unplugged at the moment. That's fine. We'll just use the TikTok microphone and not my real microphone. Okay. That's fine. Yep, I unplugged, so now you got just the TikTok mic, which is fine. Thank you, Carlos Bond. I don't love the TikTok mic when I'm here in DC because my place has tall ceilings and it kind of reverbs, but we shall live. It'll look fancy with my fancy mic anyway, even though you're not listening to the fancy mic. Anyway, guys, welcome. We'll wait another second here for the TikTokers and for you guys to arrive, and then we will get rolling. Let me see. Maybe I'll adjust my color. Yep, there we go. Good enough. All right, guys, let me get rolling here. So we've got a lot of news today, a lot of interesting news today, actually. The way this works, as you all know, is the first half of the show, I will do the news, first half or so. And then the second half of the show, I will take your guys' questions. On TikTok, you could submit questions via the Q&A link that is in my profile on TikTok. The rest of you can use the comment box at the bottom. I do this for free, and I'm doing it full-time. I've been doing it full-time since the war. So I rely on your guys' donations and contributions to support my work and keep me going. So please do keep the gifts coming on TikTok and the gifts coming on YouTube, etc., with the super chats. So thank you, guys. Let's dive right in here. So lots of interesting news today. First of all, Poland decided to pull a little bit of a surprise on Germany today. Thank you, Baby Z, for that. So the Polish President Duda was in Lviv, Ukraine today. Lviv is in the very far west of Ukraine, right near the Polish border. And he announced today, after meeting with President Zelensky, that he is going to be sending a company, military term, a company of German-made Leopard 2 tanks to Ukraine. Now, the experts are saying that could be anywhere between 10 and 12 tanks, depending how. I think in Ukraine, a company, I believe, is it 14? I was going to say 12 or 14, depending on which country. Maybe it is 14, Dark Chef is saying, for Ukraine. But either way, it isn't enough tanks, but it's a big deal anyway. Now, enough tanks would be described as several hundred. I was watching one expert today, for example, say that Ukraine needed probably 150 tanks in order to take the Russians on this spring. They're expecting a big Russian offensive coming soon, probably in the spring, and Ukraine would need about 150 tanks to stop the Russians. And I mean, to really stop the Russians in their tracks, kaboom, 150 tanks. Having said that, this is a big deal what Germany announced. Now, let's talk a little bit about this. Okay, so Poland. Poland announces it's going to send German-made tanks to Ukraine as part of an international coalition. Gets kind of funky here because Poland needs Germany's permission in order to send the tanks to Ukraine. Now, at first blush, you might think, well, if Poland bought the tanks, why can't Poland do what it wants, right? Anything you buy, you can put on eBay, for example. The problem is when you buy weapons, it doesn't work that way. When you buy weapons, you've got to go back to the country you bought the weapons from and ask them, is it okay if I share the weapons somewhere else? Now, why is it that you want to get their permission? Well, if the country is requiring it and you don't get their permission, you won't be able to buy weapons ever again in the future. In other words, if Poland were to tell Germany, well, screw you, I don't care what you say, Germany, I'm going to give Ukraine my German-made tanks anyway. Germany could say, Okay, but next time, Poland, we're not selling you any German military equipment. So there's a reason for Poland to want to do this the right way. Having said that, Poland just announced it. The Germans turned around within like not very long today. The Germans turned around and said, well, this is the first we've heard. We have received, thank you, Al, for that. We have received no requests from any NATO allies asking us to forward their weapons onto Ukraine. So, it seems, thank you, Andrew and Anhas, for the gifts there. It seems that Poland, and I will guarantee you they're doing this along with the French, and they're probably doing it along with a few of the other allies. My guess would be the Czechs, the Baltic states, that they got together and they said, you know what? We are going to announce that we're giving Ukraine the German-made tanks in order to put pressure on Germany. The idea here, and again, part of this, what gets interesting is this already happened last week. The French announced last week that, I believe it was Wednesday of last week, that they were going to be providing infantry fighting vehicles to Ukraine. The day after, the Americans and the Germans announced the same thing. It has now been reported that the French are saying, or anonymously, but the French government's admitting it, that they went public in order to pressure the Germans and the Americans both. 2 days ago, I think, I read you guys a story that supposedly the French and the Poles were getting together in order to pressure the Germans as well about the tank question. So this is really interesting. Now, let me go back to what I said initially. Initially, I was talking about why does it matter if Poland says it's going to send, say 14 German-made tanks to Ukraine, right? 14 tanks isn't enough. We know that Germany needs, Ukraine needs about 150 tanks. Michael Clark actually said this today on Sky News, that Ukraine needs about 150 tanks in order to really stop the Russians in their tracks during a spring offensive. But no NATO country has provided Ukraine with Western-made tanks until now. Nobody has. So if Poland were to go ahead and do this, or for that matter, if the Brits were to go ahead and provide tanks, because the Brits are also talking, the British, about providing some of their Challenger 2 tanks to Ukraine. The Brits, I believe, are talking about, I'm forgetting. The Brits is a small number 2. What's the number, guys, with the Brits? Is the Brits like 10 or something? It's a small number of tanks the Brits are probably talking about. But the same concept. If the British were to turn around and provide these tanks to Ukraine, that would not just break the logjam, it would break this imaginary ceiling we've got, okay? There's this concept that, oh my God, if we give Ukraine tanks, Russia will get upset and it will be an escalation that'll be crazy, right? So you almost need someone to go first, provide the tanks to Ukraine. Russia isn't going to do squat. I mean, Russia's going to bomb Ukraine again. I mean, they're bombing Ukraine anyway, right? But Russia, they're not going to use nukes. They're not going to use chemical weapons. They're not going to use biological weapons. And it will establish the fact that Russia is again bluffing. So that's why it's a big deal that the whole issue is now being discussed. Poland is saying it's going to provide tanks to Ukraine. The UK is saying it's going to provide tanks to Ukraine. But let's see what happens here, because keep in mind, the Brits, and I'll conclude with this and then move on to the next topic. The Brits can provide tanks to Ukraine without anybody's permission because they're British-made tanks. The Poles want to provide German-made tanks, and therefore they need the permission of the Germans to send the tanks. So therefore, what Poland did today, Poland wanted to publicly put pressure on Germany so that Germany would be in a position where Germany might not want to say, we're not letting our tanks go to Ukraine, and Germany would look like the bad guy. So that's what's going on there. What else we got? Another big story. There were a number of really big stories today in Ukraine. Another really big story that's got a lot of interesting sort of ramifications and a lot of sort of spy work, meaning trying to figure out what's really going on here, is Putin announced a new head of the war in Ukraine. Now, I meant to look this up before we started. I think this might be the 4th general in charge of the war in Ukraine. They've gone through a lot of them. Mind you, the war's only been going on for not even 11 months. The 24th of this month will be 11 months. We're 10 and a half months into the war, and the Russians have probably had about 4 generals running the war. Well, the latest head to roll is General Surovkin. He is going to be replaced by General Gerasimov. Now, what gets really interesting with all of this, and I actually pulled a lot of information. I mean, I've got literally a page worth of notes to talk to you guys about, because this gets really interesting in terms of what's going on with Russia. Now, first of all, on its face, the 4th, thank you. Chris the Foodie is saying that we're at the 4th now general running the war in Ukraine for the Russians. First of all, the very fact that the head of the war has been replaced again by Putin means things ain't going so well for the Russians. If the war was going well, you wouldn't get rid of your 4th general or your 3rd general and put a 4th general in, right? Per se. If this latest general were doing so well, you wouldn't fire him. Okay, that's the first thing. I mean, on its face, the Russians just can't argue with that. So that's good news for Ukraine. But it gets even more interesting. So Surovkin was hired 3 months ago. Okay, I think it was like October 8th or something. He gets hired 3 months ago, and he comes in because the war wasn't going well 3 months ago, right? So what happens is Surovkin comes in, and his idea, apparently, because the Russians started doing it once he got in there, was to bomb the hell out of the Ukrainians, right? And we know that Russia now has been bombing you. And when I say bomb the hell, I mean out of Ukrainian infrastructure. So out of Ukrainian electricity and water facilities, right? Basically, Surovkin declared war on Ukrainian civilians, thinking, and again, this is kind of stupid on his part, thinking that attacking the civilians was somehow going to convince Ukraine that, oh my God, right? We're not going to fight anymore because we don't want any more civilians killed. And the Ukrainians said, screw it, we're going to keep fighting, right? So let me pull up a little more on this. Surovkin. So Surovkin was in charge of hitting Ukraine's infrastructure that didn't work. I mean, it worked destroying the infrastructure, but it didn't work changing Ukraine's mind. Surovkin was also in charge of overseeing the withdrawal of Russian troops from Kherson. Now, handy dandy map. Kherson is the town and region both, but here's the region of Kherson. And the Russians, remember, the Ukrainians pushed the Russians back all the way south of the river. Well, when they went south of the river, they had to give up a major city, the town of Kherson. Big deal, this city. Really embarrassing for the Russians to have given that up. Surovkin was in charge of giving it up. Now, strategically, defense-wise, it was a smart move for Surovkin to give up Kherson because they lost. I mean, they lost that area. They had to give it up, but he's the guy that lost Kherson. So it's not as if this guy did great, arguably. Let me see here. The British Ministry of Defense says the move is an indicator of the increasing seriousness of the situation Russia is facing and a clear acknowledgement that the campaign is falling short of Russia's strategic goals. Makes sense. The move is likely to be greeted with extreme displeasure by much of the Russian ultra-nationalist and military blogger community, who have increasingly blamed Gerasimov, who's the new guy that they're putting in charge of the war, who have increasingly blamed Gerasimov for the poor execution of the war. So this is where things get even more interesting. So Gerasimov is the guy that, and I think he was in charge of the war like earlier, he's the guy that the far right in Russia, the military blogger right, okay, and the military bloggers are very powerful in Russia, basically former Russian military officials and others who now are giving their opinions, they're retired, so to speak, but giving their opinions on Telegram and all of these all of these social media applications that the Russians use, right? And they basically just give a blow-by-blow of how they think the war is going, right? Well, they're pissed about how their war is going. They are ultra right. I mean, they think that Russia should just destroy Ukraine, right? And obviously the war isn't going well. So these guys are much more in line with Surovkin, the guy who wanted to bomb the civilians. They don't like Gerasimov because they think Gerasimov is one of the ones responsible for screwing the war up at the beginning, right? Gerasimov was pretty much in charge of everything when the invasion happened, and we all know the invasion didn't go that well, okay? So my point in raising this isn't to get into the minutiae, but to say that this replacement of the general today, who is running the war in Ukraine actually is happening at a much higher level in Moscow, where you've got the two factions fighting each other. You've got the far right ultra nationalist bomb the hell out of the Ukrainians faction. And then you've got the, I don't want to say nicer guy faction because it's not a nicer guy, but you've got this other faction, the faction that, the nasty faction. The nasty faction also includes Prigozhin. Prigozhin is the billionaire, the oligarch, the guy who is running the Wagner Group. Remember, the Wagner Group is the mercenaries, the murderous mercenaries, right? So he's on the really nasty side of things. It looks like the nasty crowd lost today. That's what is so interesting about this. Now, a little more on this. Some analysts are saying that this could be a sign that Putin is, in fact, preparing for a new offensive in the spring, that basically he wants new leadership because, again, if he's not thrilled about how the war is going, he wants to bring in somebody new, or in this case, somebody old, to try to shake things up and change the direction. The second thing, Sky News, and this was from Sky News, which was very interesting. Sky News notes that back in November, Politico reported on an internal power struggle with two main alliances. These were a war party led by Chechen leader Ramzan Kadyrov and Wagner Group founder Yevgeny Prigozhin, who I was just telling you about. And on the other side, Russian security agencies, Defense Minister Shoigu and Chief of the General Staff Valery Gerasimov. In other words, you've got the establishment war group in Moscow, right, with the Ministry of Defense, fighting the newcomer who's the Wagner Group, the mercenaries. And at this point, at least, it means the establishment won. The establishment meaning Putin won, okay? Let me do a quick reset and we'll continue because I've got another analysis from a Rand Corporation analyst that was really interesting about what happened today as well. Just really quick, I am John Aravosis. You are watching the Aravosis Report. This is my nightly show, Monday to Friday, 6 p.m. Eastern Time, U.S., where we talk about the latest news from Ukraine. I'll go about half an hour, maybe a little longer, through the news right now. And then the second half of the show, I'll take your guys' questions. You can submit questions on TikTok via the Q&A link in my profile, on YouTube and elsewhere. Just use the comment box at the bottom. Please do continue with the gifts. Your guys' gifts help keep me going because I'm doing this full time and not making any money other than from you guys. So you help keep me doing this. So I appreciate you guys providing that. And I also have a Patreon account as well, where you can basically give a monthly donation if you want. It's patreon.com/Aravosis. Thank you, Nathan, for the cap. Patreon.com/Aravosis. Now, let's keep going here. So Dara Massicott of Rand Corporation weighed in. Elise, I see yours. I'll get to yours next. Weighed in on this whole issue of changing who's in charge of the war all the time. She says that Gerasimov and Shoigu are the proven failure. So Gerasimov, who's the one that just got appointed in charge of the war again, he's a proven failure. She says, who can claim that their leadership, so Gerasimov, the chief of the general staff, who's basically like the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff in America, would be who Gerasimov is. And thank you, Andrew. And Shoigu, who's the defense minister, who are basically working together in essence. Who can claim their leadership is competent after 1 year of this war, she says. But they are experienced players in Moscow. With this change, I view this as a power struggle that has resolved in favor of Shoigu Gerasimov. She adds, with Gerasimov in charge, if this is indeed permanent, I think the possibility of the Russians asking their tired force to do something that it cannot handle rises exponentially. Thank you, Ali, for the llama. Gerasimov didn't push back in February 2022 and won't do it now. I don't know if that's bad or good for Ukraine. Let me explain what she just said, which is really interesting. And this is a woman who's a top analyst at the Rand Corporation. What she's saying is, back in February when the war started, these guys were heading the Department of Defense or the Ministry of Defense in Moscow, and they were the head. He was the uniformed head of the military, the two guys who now seem to have won the power struggle. Both of them knew that they didn't have enough troops. Okay, thank you, Zoe, for the hat. That they did not have enough troops going into the war. They went ahead with the war anyway, and they didn't change. They didn't stand up to Putin. And what happened? Russia had a disastrous beginning to this war, right? And they invaded from the north. The Ukrainians were able to push them back. And now, at best, it's a stalemate. And if at worst it's a stalemate, and at best the Ukrainians are making incremental gains against the Russians. So what she's saying is that she's worried about is that bringing these guys in who are basically yes men to Putin, she worries that it means that the next thing that Putin is planning is kind of equally crazy. And it's the kind of thing that the Russians can't really handle, but that he's planning something and he needed his yes men to come back and basically force the troops to do it anyway, even though they can't do it. Now, I think the reason she says, I don't know if that's good or bad for Ukraine is this. Obviously, you'd say it's good for Ukraine if the Russians try to accomplish something that they can't win at, right? Yeah, great, right? We want the Russian offensive to fail. What I think she might mean, though, is it could be so deadly what the Russians are planning that there could be a lot of death, a lot of injury amongst the Ukrainians as well. That's my interpretation of what she's getting at. There was another story, unrelated, that was very weird today, that came from Marcus Weisgerber of Defense One, which is a good publication here in town, covers defense matters. And the U.S. Secretary of the Navy, Carlos del Toro, thank you for the little crown there, Robert, is talking at a conference today, along with another U.S. admiral. And del Toro gets up and talks to a group of reporters. I'm going to read you some of this. This is from Weisgerber, the reporter at Defense One. So del Toro, the U.S. Secretary of the Navy, gets in front of a group of reporters and says, the predominance of America, I mean, this is the paraphrase. I'm sorry. Oh shit. Sorry. I'm like forgetting this. Oh, here we go. Yes. And this is the paraphrase of what he says. So the U.S. Secretary of the Navy says today at a conference that within the next 6 months, the U.S. Navy may need to choose between arming itself or Ukraine. Right? Thank you, Piotman. At the same conference, an admiral on a panel discussion echoes the same concern. Okay? So you've got the Secretary of the U.S. Navy and an admiral, U.S. Navy, together giving the same message, thank you, blah, blah, that basically undercuts Joe Biden, right? Because what they're both saying is in 6 months, this is going to be trouble for the U.S. military. We're no longer going to be able to, basically, we're going to have to put America at risk because we're helping Ukraine in 6 months is what this jerk is saying. Okay? Thank you, Addie. The fact that the Secretary of the Navy said this at the same conference on the same day that an admiral, a U.S. admiral, said the same thing means they planned it, right? This was a coordinated message from them. Thank you, JC. Now, I said earlier today that either the Secretary of the Navy and the admiral got together and they wanted to publicly undercut Joe Biden. Mind you, in America, the president is also the commander-in-chief of the military. In other words, he's the senior most military officer. He's not an officer, but you get what I mean, right? So it's even more egregious. I mean, the president is obviously in charge, but it's even more egregious because he's their commanding officer in essence. And they went public in order to try to undercut their commanding officer. Thank you, Patty, for that. Within probably an hour, I made sure I sent it to friends of mine who are in high places in Washington as well, and was like, WTF? Like, what is this, right? Totally, mind you, okay? Not only does it undercut Biden, it totally helps Putin, right? Putin is looking at this and Putin is going, holy cow, I've got the Secretary of the U.S. Navy and a top American admiral are publicly undercutting Biden. Thank you, PJ, for that. Are publicly undercutting Biden and saying, in 6 months, we're going to have to decide between harming America and helping Ukraine, right? That gives Putin, frankly, if you're Putin, you say, this is great. Hold on another 6 months. Don't even negotiate. Just hold on another 6 months. If you're somebody in Congress or Fox News who is anti this war, and in Congress at this point, the anti-war folks are almost exclusively the MAGA Republicans at this point. Even the crazies on the left, I say crazies, there's only really a few crazies, but even the far left of the left has been pretty quiet they've been pretty supportive in the Congress. I mean, the MAGA folks, not supportive at all. It gives them fuel as well. Any case, well, the Navy secretary came out about an hour later and gave this weird clarification where he said, well, I was trying to stress that the supply chain would be stressed if the war continues for another 6 months. But, and he throws in something like, but, you know, we've got staff, including, and he names his staff, we got staff, including so-and-so, who are working with American defense contractors to make sure that that problem doesn't happen. And I'm sitting here going, basically, this jerk wanted to undercut Biden. He doesn't like the fact that we're helping Ukraine for whatever reason. I worry the Americans will know what I'm talking about. I worry that we may even have a Michael Flynn situation on our hand, where we've got somebody who's a crazy, I mean, who's running the Secretary of the Navy, somebody who basically is, doing his own thing, way out of, it's way out of line. Now, he backtracked, but I tweeted at him when he backtracked and went, no, you specifically said Biden's policy was putting America at risk in 6 months, that we were going to have to decide between helping America and helping Ukraine. What changed in the last hour? And why did, and again, I'll stop with this point. I've got more news, but stop with this point. He made this obnoxious comment within an hour or two of an admiral at the same conference making the same comment. He and the admiral coordinated this. They were talking. They both coordinated this. So anyway, all right, enough of that. Really obnoxious. Oh, I'm sorry. The final point, I should have said this. The final point is we're not giving Ukraine any Navy equipment. How is the U.S. Navy going to be taxed in 6 months where we'll no longer be able to support the U.S. Navy because we're helping Ukraine? We're not giving them anything from the Navy. It doesn't work that way, right? It's insane. It's just incredibly obnoxious. The guy ought to be fired. The admiral at least ought to be fired. Thank you, B. Smith, for that, for the hat there. All right, let me keep going on here. There's a story about Kazakhstan. I'm not going to go too long on it, but it's an interesting story because one of the issues you guys have raised before is, how does the war affect Russia in terms of the perception other countries have of Russia? Actually, I'm going to put my jacket on now. My temperature is going like back and forth in my apartment here. And I've been telling you that basically the fact that Russia is doing, thank you. Who was that? JCG. Thank you for that. The fact that, I think this goes with my my flannel. The fact that Russia is doing so poorly, the fact that Russian weapons are doing so poorly. Thank you, a dozen for the flailing guy. The fact that Russian troops are doing so poorly, the fact that so many Russian troops are dying, right? The fact that Russia is in so much trouble now means other countries who might have been afraid of Russia are going to be more willing to stand up to Russia. Some of those countries, a lot of those countries are going to be the former Soviet countries, the countries that were part of the Soviet Union, right? Thank you, B. Smith, for that. One of those countries is Kazakhstan. So the Russians got really bent out of shape in the last day because someone in Kazakhstan sent over a yurt to Bucha, right? Bucha, you remember, is the town north of Kyiv that in end of March, early April, the journalists came through along with the Ukrainian military, and they realized just horrific human rights violations, right? War crimes, the real war crimes. Remember the 20 dead civilians on the main street? They just murdered these civilians. The old man who was riding his bicycle and he was lying still in the bicycle dead. Horrific, right? So the Kazakhs get together, and apparently it was the private sector in Kazakhstan. Kazakh businesses got together and they put together a yurt. A yurt is a tent of sorts. It is a tent, but I was looking at the pictures online. It almost looks like a small circus tent. It looks like the kind of tent you would see in Lawrence of Arabia or something, to me at least, right? It's the tent where it's a circle and you've got a number of things like this. It comes up and then comes up like this, right? So it's around, the chieftain is in kind of a posh tent. That would be the way a Brit might say it. Yes, a yurt, Y-U-R-T. Well, they sent what they called a yurt of invincibility. The Kazakhs sent to Bucha. Let me read this for you. It's local residents are able to get free traditional Kazakh food and tea and charge their electronic devices for free. I mean, is that like the neatest thing? And they wanted to do it to Bucha because Bucha went through such a horrific, crimes by the Russians against them, right? Really sweet. The Russians flipped out because, of course, the issue here is that Kazakhstan. Oh, I'm sorry. I was forgetting Elise and Lisa. I forgot your guys' questions. I'll get to your questions after the yurt of invincibility. I'm sorry about that. You know what? I will pull up Elise's question so I actually see it on the screen. So listen to this. The Russians freak out, and Russian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova says in a statement yesterday that Russia expects an official explanation from Kazakhstan regarding the matter in order to avoid damaging the Russia-Kazakhstan strategic partnership and alliance. Mind you, it's a food tent, okay? It's a tent where they can charge their phones and get some food for free. And the Russians are flipping out. Today, the Kazakh government responded because the story is from Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty. So Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty contacts the Kazakh government and goes, hey, the Russians want an answer. You willing to give us an answer? The Kazakh government goes, sure, right? So they're giving an answer to an American government news body just to add to the nastiness of this whole thing from the Kazakh side. Listen to this. Kazakh Foreign Ministry spokesman Aybek Smadiyarov, I'm going to say, said there was nothing to explain. The yurt was placed there. So what is the problem? It is there. You can imagine the guy saying this, right? So what's the problem? It's there. The help was provided. It is an initiative of private Kazakhstani companies. They organized it, transported it, and are providing the assistance. The situation in Ukraine is obviously complicated. Maybe for some information about the yurt looks different. I'm not sure what he meant by that. However, we do not see any problem here. And that was the end of the discussion. So the Russians, but again, the reason I bring this up is the Russians thought they were going to push around one of their former subjects, right? Because the Soviet Union, Kazakhstan was, yet another captive member of the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union basically was made up of 15 countries. 14 of them were captives. One of them was free, which were the Russians, so to speak. I mean, the Russian people were not free, but the Russian government was pretty much in charge of everybody else, in essence. And the other ones, forget it, right? The other ones, right, basically bullied around. The Ukrainians, right? The Baltic states, Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, the Kazakhs, Armenia, Azerbaijan, everybody pretty much bullied around by the Russians. This is indicative of how bad things are going for the Russians, basically, that even the small countries on the rim now are kind of going, you know what? Nah. Now, the final story I was going to tell you, I'm not going to read all the quotes, but very interesting. So Gherkin, I've told you about Igor Gherkin before. Sorry, quick little sip of water. Oh, shit. I'm doing it again. I always swear whenever I'm like, Elise's question. Sorry, Elise. Okay, Elise's question. I'm being bad. Where's my, here are my glasses. Sorry, Elise. I was getting rolling on this. Sorry about that. Elise was asking, super chat question. Thank you for that. Do you think it's possible that the musical chairs going on with the generals, meaning who's in charge of the war in Ukraine by the Russians, happened because of outrage at home over the stupid loss of hundreds of soldiers in Marika or Mavika or whatever, and someone's head had to roll? That's interesting. That could be the final thing. That could easily have been the final thing that did it, right? I mean, they were pissed about pulling out of Kherson. Clearly, now mind you, how did he sell to Putin the whole strategy of, we're going to bomb the Ukrainian civilians, and when we do it, right, get ready. Yep, I've got Lisa's next. And when we bomb the Ukrainian civilians, they're going to fold like, cheap folding chairs or whatever. And they didn't. So we don't know whether he sold Putin on that strategy, and now Putin's going, okay, right? Or even more so, that all of these attacks on the civilians, he could have sold Putin and said, all of these attacks on the civilians, NATO won't be able to handle it. NATO's a bunch of wimps. When all of these civilians get killed, NATO is going to say, that's it. No more, right? We can't allow this to continue. Well, in fact, thank you, Chelsea. And by the way, Elise, this is another possibility. It is quite possible that NATO is giving better and better and better weapons to Ukraine because of all the civilian attacks, right? Because NATO is seeing how these attacks on civilians in Ukraine, right? The attacks on apartment buildings, the attacks on the electrical infrastructure, that it's not stopping. Folded like an omelet, that's a good one. That it's not stopping, right? And that basically because of these attacks on civilian, NATO finally said, you know what? Thank you, JC. NATO finally said, you know what? We don't have a choice. We've got to give better weapons because they're going to just destroy the Ukrainian civilian population. So this guy who just got fired may have been responsible for NATO now giving tanks even potentially to the Ukrainians. So it could be that. I wonder. It's a combination of everything, Elise. But I wonder if it's all the military failures, but it's all like a throw rug. Everyone's throwing in the cheap expressions, like a folded like a throw rug. Happen to know Lockheed Martin is hiring a lot? Well, Elise is giving us some job advice for folks. American defense contractor Lockheed Martin is doing some hiring. I'm not surprised. I mean, we need a lot of weapons. We need a lot of weapons for Ukraine, and we need a lot of weapons in order to reconstitute the American military, because we've got to be prepared as well. Who knows what's going on with Taiwan or everything else? So yeah, that's interesting though. I didn't know that. That's very interesting. And who was this? Jason. Now, Jason, I've got a sneaking feeling you meant to put a question in there that looks like a super chat. By the way, very generous of you. Thank you. If you meant to throw a question in, please write it. You don't have to pay for it. Just and who was that? That was B. Smith. Thank you, B. Smith. Write your question separately, and I'll get to you next. Okay. So Natalie throws in a super chat question as well. Hang on a sec here. Oh, I tried to use the Q&A on TikTok. It doesn't work for everybody. TikTok's got some glitch where some people just it stops. Like you try to submit the question and it just stops you from doing it. I apologize for that, but it's a TikTok problem. They know about it, but so sorry. Have you been able to see any verification of the Wagner Group claim over finding the body and passports of the British aid workers in Ukraine? Jason, I see you. Thank you. Thanks, Roshan. I don't know. Thank you, David, for the Galaxy. That's one of my faves. Thank you. First of all, are these the two guys that we heard about yesterday? I'm forgetting their names. One is a young guy in his 20s, kind of sandy blondish, reddish hair. And the other one's another one. I'm not sure if those were the two guys that you're talking about. But I don't know. I don't know any update on them. Sorry. Those are the two. Okay. People are saying those are the two you're talking about. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know if there's any update on that. Sorry. I haven't heard about it. I admit that I'm not paying as much attention to, I saw the story initially, but I'm not paying as much attention to sort of individual, whether it's people on our side that have volunteered to fight or whatever. I feel bad for them, obviously, but it kind of doesn't feel like it rises to enough of a story for me to tell you guys, in essence. In any case, I agree with you. I don't mean to say it's not a story, but I'm trying to find stories that basically, thank you, Coeur de Leon, that basically maybe there's a larger lesson we can take in terms of where the war is going. In any case, yep, I don't know. I was going to tell you really quick, Gherkin, really quick, and then we'll do the rest of the questions. So Igor Gherkin is a Russian, here we go. Jason's question. Then we'll do Igor. How long till the Canadian vehicles arrive there? I don't know. Canada, oh God, remind me which vehicles Canada is sending. Canada was just buying, oh God, I'm getting these all mixed up. In the last week, we know that Canada is buying, hang on. Thank you, dear Benji, for the llama there. That Canada, not vehicles though. Canada was buying, I think, the NASAMS, right? In the last week, we found that out. Which vehicles is Canada sending? Which vehicles are they sending? I don't know if anybody knows on this. Okay. There we go. Somebody on YouTube from Canada, on TikTok from Canada, says they've arrived 39 armored vehicles. Oh, okay. Okay, so it was infantry fighting vehicles as well. Okay, well, there you go. Bison armored carriers. Excellent. Okay. Snowmobiles. Oh, are they in essence snowmobiles? Do you guys call them snowmobiles? The Alaskans call them snow machines. And they're also building armored vehicles and a moose. A bison wasn't it? Okay. Okay, interesting. Okay, thank you. Okay, thanks, guys. I appreciate that. I wasn't really up on what the Canadians were sending, so thank you for that. All right, you know what? Gherkin, I'm going to tell you the literally 30-second of Gherkin. Gherkin is a top Russian military blogger, former FSB official, which means Russian secret, spy agency that was the follow-on to the KGB. He as well was responsible for shooting down the civilian plane back in 2014 that killed almost 300 civilians over Ukraine, a civilian airliner. So a commercial airliner. So that's who he is. He's been very critical of the war effort, saying it's not going very well, and basically came out and made a comment that finally kind of sort of called for Putin to be fired. However one fires Putin. Up until now, the military bloggers have been very careful to try to say that, well, we're not blaming Putin. We're saying everybody surrounding Putin is just giving him really bad advice and blah, 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 right? Well, Gherkin today finally came out and said, he's the one hiring them. He's the one listening to them. And then says, I'm not saying, thank you, Warren, for that, Joe Warren. He says, I'm not saying we should get rid of Putin, right? Thank you, Alan, for those. And get this, the I'm not saying we should get rid of Putin. I don't know if I have the exact quote here. Yes. He says, I'm not saying we should get rid of Putin, but listen to why we shouldn't get rid of Putin. Not because, how dare we suggest getting rid of dear leader who we love, right? That's not his reason for not getting rid of Putin. He says he's against a change of presidential leadership during the war as it would lead to military and civil catastrophe. So he doesn't want to get rid of Putin because they're still at war. He doesn't want to not get rid of Putin because Putin doesn't deserve it, right? So this guy could be in real trouble. I mean, this is very interesting. Very interesting that he did that. I got a question here from Ben. Actually, let me do a quick little reset, and then I'll do Ben's. Actually, I'll put Ben's question on the screen. I am John Aravosis. This is the Aravosis Report. This is our nightly show where we talk about the latest news from Ukraine. We are shifting over now to the Q&A section of the show, although I've already had a number of super chat questions for the paid questions on YouTube. And for the next 20 minutes or so, we'll take your guys' questions. I was going to say I've got a Discord set up as well. You can go check out my Discord at discord.aravosis.com. I'll go to the Discord for a few minutes afterwards, probably not too long, but a few minutes after the show, we go and we hang out there. And I've got two very cool auction items at the Discord right now going on. We've got basically cool stuff from Ukraine that I've been auctioning off. My friend Vlad gets it for me and sends it here to the States. And 50% of the proceeds for the auction I channel back into the humanitarian aid work that we've been doing in Ukraine. We've raised, at this point, probably over $85,000 for humanitarian aid work to Ukraine. I've not taken any of that. And 50% of the money from the auction, we also use to support my work because, as I've told you guys, I'm doing this for free and I'm doing it full time. So I need something to pay the bills, just like the rest of you have a job. This is my job. So that's what we're doing with the auctions. But at the auctions, we've got the Kerch Bridge stamps. Remember, Kerch Bridge is the bridge in the south that we think the Ukrainians bombed, and it really pissed Putin off because this was like his favorite bridge. Well, I've got the commemorative stamps for the Kerch Bridge that we're auctioning off, and I've got the final allotment of the Azov-style bracelets. I always feel like I'm doing an infomercial when I hold this up. This is a bracelet that the Ukrainian military produced. It says, this is Azov style at the top. You can see the Ukrainian trident there. So you guys, and this is a bracelet made from steel from the Azov style plant. That's a thing of steel in the middle there, and then plastic rope, so to speak. So it's nice and twined. And this is the plant where 2,000 Ukrainians held off 14,000 Russians for 2 months, right, in Mariupol, one of the occupied towns there that the Russians really destroyed. And the Ukrainians, in order to make money for the military, sold these things. 100% of the money that they raised, we bought these. So the money we paid to Ukraine, 100% of that money is going to the military. We are now auctioning them off. And of the money we get, half the money I'm going to put into humanitarian aid, and half of it is going to be to support my work again, because I'm doing this for free. But they're very cool. We're auctioning them. So go check out the auction. I've got several left. We'll be auctioning the next couple of weeks, several of them. And there aren't any more. They've used up all the steel. The Ukrainians don't have any more. So this is it. I got some of the last ones. It's pretty cool. It's very cool, actually. But you can check it out at discord.aravosis.com. All right, let me see here. Ben has a question on the Super Chat. Thank you for doing it via Super Chat, Ben. I appreciate that. Saw on Sky News an analysis that suggested Putin removed Surovikin. Now, he's talking about Putin removing the guy, basically firing the guy who was in charge of the war in Ukraine. It's discord.aravosis.com is how you find it. Or on TikTok, the easiest way, go to my profile. I've got a Linktree link in my profile on TikTok. Just click it, and you'll find all of my links there. My Discord, my Patreon, you name it. For the rest of you, aravosis.com. That's the easiest way to find any of that, my Discord or anything else. So he's talking, Ben's question is regarding Putin firing the general that was in charge of the war in Ukraine, Surovikin. Thank you, Warren, Joe Warren, for that. So he says, saw on Sky News an analysis that suggested Putin removed Surovikin because he was getting too powerful and had links to Prigozhin. Do you think this is a sign Putin is worried about losing power from those around him? Yeah. Remember, and actually, this is something I've been telling you guys for the last few weeks. Remember, we were talking about right after New Year's, so 10 days ago now, I was telling you how Prigozhin, who is the Russian oligarch, a corrupt Russian billionaire who runs the Wagner mercenary group, so they're paid soldiers, and how this guy has his own army. It's a private army this guy has. They go around the world. They're working for the government in Mali, a number of other people. They're vicious murderers. They're very well trained vicious murderers, but they're vicious murderers. And he's now fighting in Ukraine as well. His people are fighting in Ukraine. And I mentioned how, for example, Putin did not go to Ukraine for New Year's or Christmas. Prigozhin went to New Year's for the holidays. Went to Ukraine for the holidays. He went to the front. Pictures of Prigozhin with the troops on the holidays, right? You know, he's a man of the people. Putin's back in Moscow, appearing with, remember those 10 troops that people thought might be fake? And even worse, Putin's wearing a bulletproof vest. You could tell from the back of his jacket. He's wearing a bulletproof vest, meaning he's afraid of his own soldiers killing him, right? Versus Prigozhin, man of the people. And I was saying how it sure looks like a lot of this is a lot of what Prigozhin does, who runs the mercenary group, is an affront to Putin. It looks like he's challenging Putin, basically saying, I'm the military guy you should be looking to, not Vladimir Putin. And the fact that Prigozhin's guy, Surovikin, I didn't mention, but Prigozhin, the oligarch who's the head of Wagner, actually publicly endorsed Surovikin. Like he was Surovikin's guy, or Surovikin was his guy. Once you get over to the Discord, just scroll. Well, when you get to the Discord, you've got to click the accept button, the read me and all of that. And then once you click and read it and everything else, the rest of the board appears and you'll see the auctions further down. Anyway, so it's bad. It's bad for it. Actually, I was going to tell you the one analysis I read today, and I don't know if it was from Institute for the Study of War or if it was one of the defense people that Sky News was quoting. I'm not sure which, but they were saying that because Putin has now picked Gerasimov to come in, this now sends the message to Prigozhin that basically he's got to get with the program or else, because he lost basically the fight. Well, he didn't lose the fight entirely, but he lost sort of this political infighting that was going on in Moscow. So yeah, I think it sends a message to him and those around him. Yeah, that Putin is basically, again, Putin is surrounding himself with yes men again, Let me pull up some of the questions here on TikTok. Hang on here. I'm happy to collaborate with other folks who cover Ukraine. I don't know who the two people are that you mentioned, but happy to. What else we got? Now that NATO is potentially providing tanks, exactly, potentially. Oops, let me get the question out of the way. Thanks again, Ben, for that. I appreciate that. Let me make sure I didn't miss anybody else here. Okay, I did not. Okay, I did not. That's good. Now that NATO is potentially providing tanks, what are the chances that Poland brings up the MiG-29 question again? I was seeing somebody today, I'm forgetting who, but somebody, grabbing my tea here as well, somebody today was saying that they felt it was only a matter of time before we got to the point where NATO is providing aircraft as well. Thank you, Annie, for that. That basically, we've now established a pattern where every few months we give something better. I think it really started with the HIMARS, right? Thank you. A dozen, 1, 2, 3, where it's weapons, not just better weapons, but weapons that, everyone was saying crossed the line. Like, oh my God, if we give those weapons, Putin will get mad, right? Oh, thanks, Paramarine. Good to see you again. So, you had the HIMARS, I'm already forgetting several of the other ones. We had the Bradley fighting vehicles the other day, and now potentially tanks from Britain and tanks from Poland as well. Thank you, Hector. And that they were saying that they think eventually it means, well, it was Michael Clark. Okay, that's it. That was it then. Because Liz, one of you guys, sent me the video of Michael Clark saying it on Sky News today. So that's where I saw it. Thank you for saying that, Rugby Dump. I appreciate that. So yeah, Michael Clark, who's a former Australian. No, he's not the former Australian general, is he? Or is he? His accent always confuses me. I think he is a former Australian general. He was saying that it's only a matter of time now before we get to aircraft and everything else, which would be great. So hopefully, show the map. You're thirsty. No, you got to wait for your map. You got to wait for your map. Although I am getting hungry today. I don't know. I may not go to the Discord tonight. We'll have to see. I'm getting a little hungry. The artillery video I've already got it. I can't post it here because I don't know how TikTok will react. Basically, what Paramarine is asking about is we raised $4,000 from you guys to buy, to sponsor, I should say, an artillery gun in Ukraine. And we paid $4,000. They put our message on the side. Our message said for Bucha, meaning, on behalf of Bucha, where the war crimes happened against the Ukrainians. And then it put my handle at Aravosis, which on most of my social media, other than YouTube, because YouTube is being difficult, on most of my social media, that's my social media handle, at Aravosis. So we got it. They did a video for us of the gun firing, and it was actually in Kherson before Kherson fell, before the town of Kherson fell. It was our gun firing at the Russians, and it's a beautiful video of the gun, and then some close-up pictures of it as well. But because I'm a little nervous as to how TikTok would respond to that, I don't know how they'd feel about a live weapon going off, firing at the Russians. And mind you, it's got my TikTok logo on it or my TikTok screen name. I ended up putting it on Twitter, which was okay with it. And it's over on it's over on the Discord as well. So yeah, I don't want to tempt the TikTok gods, as it were. Oh, it's over on Discord. I've got the images and the video over on the Discord. It's very cool, and I can put them up again just to kind of make it. You know what I can do too? Actually, I can ask Syndicate at some point. I may be able to do it too, but he could probably do it more easily. Just to make a separate little thing that's the video of the artillery, because people ask for it, and it's kind of a neat thing. So I'd like to put it. Oh, that's true. Instagram. I always forget about that. I probably could put it on Instagram. Is Instagram okay with that kind of stuff? I never know. No, that's okay. Just wanted you to know. We did get it, but I'm careful about it. And YouTube as well. YouTube might not like it. TikTok definitely wouldn't like it. But yeah, Instagram, I've got no and yes on Instagram. Okay. We shall see. Instagram has a ton of Instagram, no. Definitely yes, not Instagram. All right. I'm not going to do Instagram because I'm seeing both of them here, but you want to be careful with this stuff, All right, let me see here. What else we got here? Well, we got another Jesus loves me guy. That person was on TikTok too. Yeah. Well, if that's the same person, feel free to boot them. Because we ain't here to talk about that. All right, let me look here. Yeah, I'm getting very hungry today. Let me see what else we got here. Reading the questions on TikTok. Isn't what the admiral said insubordination? Potentially. I mean, I'm a lawyer, but I'm not a military lawyer, so I'm not really an expert on what it is. But if the admiral, the U.S. admiral, and the U.S. Secretary of the Navy went public to basically criticize the war effort in order to undercut Biden's policy and undercut Biden, I think that'd be insubordination. Yes. It's pretty damn close. Yeah, Dark Chef is saying it's close. Again, it would go to motive and everything else. At the very least, I'm going to guess that the Secretary of Defense called them and basically said STFU. And it might have, who knows, Biden himself might have even called them and said, man, what are you doing? If I were Biden, I would basically say whoever's going to get them more concerned should call them and say, would you like to be fired? And that admiral should really be entire, because the Secretary of the Navy is a civilian. I don't know whether he was a civilian, but he is a civilian. It's a civilian job. The admiral, that's a military job. He should be in real trouble. Let's see here. Looking for more questions on TikTok. Do we acknowledge or assist any anti-mercenary groups sent to counter PMC Wagner? Oh, no. No, we certainly haven't acknowledged anybody. I mean, the U.S. government officially, and what I mean is we don't know of anything where the U.S. government is sending Americans over to fight the Russians. I don't even know if that's true. I don't even know if that's true. Meaning I've not even heard that the Americans are sending anybody, to actually fight the Russians. I don't mean to help the Ukrainians. That's a different question, right? I would guarantee you we probably got Americans who are secretly with the government sending them. And by the way, Brits and other Europeans as well, where their governments would have sent them to help the Ukrainians behind the scenes, but actually fight the Russians directly. I would doubt it. Yeah. Yeah. That's what Dark Chef is saying. No American personnel, period. That would be my sense as well. Even doing it like, Black Ops or like something kind of secret behind the scenes, we'd be too afraid of that blowing up. And at least up until now, right, we've been too afraid of it becoming a America versus Russia war. So up until now, we wouldn't want to, I don't see Biden agreeing to that. Certainly not people who would actually be fighting. Angry Biden is scary. I've seen videos. Biden does have a temper. He absolutely has a temper. Yeah. No, he really does. So Biden calling the guy, Biden could have called the guy and gotten pissed off. I hope he does. I hope he did. All right, let me do a quick recap of the news today. And then I think I'm going to skip the Discord tonight just because I'm starving, guys. And, I get headaches if I don't eat. So we'll skip. I've been doing the Discord. Well, I did Discord Monday and Tuesday, though, which is pretty good. So I've been doing pretty good. Exactly. Don't piss off Biden. All right. So the news we covered today. Yeah, please don't starve John. Please feed the John. Polish President Duda promises to send a company estimated to be 10 or 12 German-made, or maybe 14, some are saying, German-made Leopard 2 tanks as part of an international coalition to Ukraine. The UK is number 10 Downing Street told journalists that the British Prime Minister has asked the Defense Secretary to work with partners in the coming weeks to go further and faster with our support for Ukraine, including the provision of tanks as well, which is great. Putin fired the head of the war in Ukraine and put somebody else in charge, which is really interesting because, and I talked at length about that, because it gets into a whole power struggle issue in Moscow between sort of the far right, the mercenary guys, Putin, but it also means potentially that Putin is putting people back in charge who were the yes men he had at the beginning of the war that helped him get into so much trouble to start with. Let me see here. That's pretty much the same thing. I then talked about how the U.S. Secretary of the Navy and an admiral both spoke at a conference in Virginia today and made some really obnoxious comments about how, in 6 months, we're going to have to decide between whether we buy weapons for the U.S. Navy or for Ukraine. And it made it sound like he was suggesting that Biden's policy was going to hurt America's war readiness, which is just incredibly obnoxious. He had to walk back the comments, but this sounds like something that was planned, and I was not happy about it. I didn't mention, by the way, in Soledar, which is in eastern Ukraine, the Russians claimed that they had captured Soledar or most of it. The Ukrainians denied it today. My guess is we're seeing a back and forth go on with the Russians probably have some of Soledar captured. The Ukrainians have some of it on, still in their own control. This is eastern Ukraine, and that's where you're seeing a back and forth. But as always, the Russians were overstating how well they did. Big surprise. We then talked about Kazakhstan, which is a former Soviet republic, basically standing up to the Russians today. The Russians were pissed off because the Kazakh people sent over some aid, food aid and electricity to help the Ukrainians in Bucha. And the Russian government got upset, and the Kazakh government basically said, go stuff go stuff it, which was interesting. And then finally, we talked about how one of the prominent Russian military bloggers pretty much called for Putin to be replaced today, which is the kind of thing that can get you in real trouble, thrown out windows and things in Moscow. So very interesting, very interesting. Okay. And I will say, finally, behave on you TikTok. I can see some of you are standing up to the moderators. Don't stand up to the moderators. The moderators are sanctioned. They're my cardinals. Do not give sass to the moderators. But that'll be it for tonight, guys. Thanks for joining us. I will be back again tomorrow night, 6 p.m. Eastern time, US. And, we'll see about that, Rachel. I don't know. It's hard to know what's going on with the algorithms, but in any case, I will not do the Discord tonight because I am famished and I'm going to go reheat some of my pizza, which will take 5 or 10 minutes from the other day. Thank you, a dozen there, but do check out my Discord anyway, discord.aravosis.com. Thank you, Benji, for the claws and the pause. And there you go, guys. I will see you tomorrow. Thanks again for all the moderation. I did not see them, but I understand there were a lot of trolls tonight. I guess there always are. I try not to read the comments when I'm in the news portion of the show, because then I see the trolls and stuff and it potentially throws me, but if I don't, and that's what they want to do, so I don't let them throw me. All right, guys, thank you so much. I will see you all tomorrow. Thank you for the gifts as well. And see you guys tomorrow night, 6 p.m. Eastern. Okay. All right. Thanks again, guys. All right. Woo. All right. Good night, you guys.